Hello, this is J9LP, and welcome to a special installment where I will be sharing with you my views on E3, the Microsoft conference. So I got to be honest with you, I didn't actually catch this live at the time, so this is obviously going to be a bit late thing that I'm going to be putting out there, because honestly I did actually take a couple of days off, and that was actually more to look after my sister who just come out of hospital, and she's kind of recovering for a while, but also it was just to take a couple of days off work, and I thought it would be the perfect time to do so while E3 was going on about, because if not, then I just end up being horribly distracted from work. No one wants that, especially not my boss, because there's just so much stuff going on at the moment. The Microsoft conference was going to be the first of the big platform holder conferences, so I didn't actually catch it live, but I did actually see it afterwards through a pre-recorded stream. So most of my impressions are going to be coming from that. I'll just be covering a few things here, just because there's actually a lot to cover with this conference. So I will start with, well, what the conference started with, which was Halo 5 Guardians, which looks absolutely fantastic. I kind of love the plot that they've got going on there, with Master Chief supposedly being a traitor to the Spartans, and another new character, Spartan Locke, actually going after him to find out the mystery of what is actually going on there. And they did show quite a big, supposedly gameplay trailer, although you can never be too sure after things like Killzone 2 and stuff like that, but looking at it, obviously it's something that looks possible. I'm pretty sure that there will be stuff like people will be looking for downgrades and stuff like that. I just don't, this thing has been going on for years, people. You can't be fooled by stuff. I don't know why you bother to look. You know the game half the time isn't going to look as good as when they actually prove it, because they show it on different platforms that it's not going to be indicative of the final game. Things tend to be left out to be dropped out for performance issues and stuff like that, so people get upset about these things far too easily. Okay, I'm going to go on a rant about this sort of thing, so I'll stop that now. But honestly, it looks really good at the moment, and whether you expect it to actually look as good when it actually comes out, I think it's kind of immaterial. I think we should be more concerned about how it plays, and if it works. I think that's more important, in all complete honesty. I don't know. Just things, but I just think it's just crazy with this. I mean, it's not this generation. This thing has been going on for absolute chopping donkey's ages. It's nothing new, really. Anyways, so enough about that. Really interesting things going on there, and especially with the multiplayer, because I don't know if you'll actually call this sort of thing any kind of an innovation. I'm not pretty sure it's been done a number of times before, because of the nature of one team sort of going after another. They've actually integrated that into the multiplayer as well, so essentially you'll be getting multiplayer within the campaign, which I think seems really interesting. I'm wondering how they're actually going to pull that off. It seems possible. I think the way they kind of lay out the story kind of actually accommodates that, and it could lead to some very sort of interesting forks in the progression of the story. And of course you've got the other sort of big multiplayer thing, which I think is along the same lines, and they've actually called it Warzone. This along with the last title, well, more like with Halo 3, really, where they've innovated on online multiplayer with these games, and it seems it's going to be a good thing. Seems to be 343 Studios actually putting their foot down and actually putting out a really good game, because Halo 4, while that is a good game as well, but it seems to have not been as well received, and a lot of people thought it was kind of a step down from the last game. I couldn't say for sure because I haven't actually played it myself, but that's what I've been hearing a lot of. Anyway, but it certainly looks interesting, and I'll have to see how that actually develops when it comes out. And it will be coming out on October 27th, 2015, this year. Oh yeah, get on that. I'm not going to say pre-order now because I'm one of those guys who don't really believe in pre-ordering. And it seems like quite a few other people kind of wising up to that. But whatever it is, just keep an eye out for that one, because that is actually looking good. So after that, Phil Spencer came on to the scene, bringing about his spiel on how Xbox is great and you really should be on that platform, and he dropped on a whopping great big clanger, which I wasn't expecting, and possibly a few other people probably decided to have actually given up on, given that it wasn't going to be a big thing this gen for at least two of the major console platform holders anyway. But the announcement that Phil Spencer brought onto the stage was that you can now play Xbox 360 games on your Xbox One. So basically, Xbox One will have Xbox 360 native backwards compatibility, which essentially means that your past library, everything you've essentially bought that is actually already on Xbox Live, and all of your physical purchases, of course, will be playable on the Xbox One just from the get-go, and you only have to pay to actually play those titles as well, since you already have them in the case of the digital purchases, which is absolutely freaking-tastic. I think one of the things that I saw from those platform holders that I thought was a bit of I wouldn't necessarily say a misstep. I think my view, I was kind of cynical about it, because it seemed that it was pretty much an excuse for them to essentially resell all of their titles, and you seem to have got that a lot with a lot of remasters coming out and stuff like that, which still seems to be happening anyway, and I just thought, this is a bit dodgy. But then again, at the very least, when Sony brought out Flower for the PlayStation 4 and a number of other titles that actually be coming out for it, if you purchased the game already, you could actually get that anyway. But that was a remade game, it wasn't a backwards compatible. None of the PS3 games that you got would work with the PlayStation 4 because it didn't have backwards compatibility, and same with Xbox One. But at least with Xbox One now, you are able to do that. So this is signaling a couple of big things for me. One of them is almost kind of obvious. They want a differentiator. They want to move more Xbox Ones. And the one thing that is kind of different from the Xbox One, from the PlayStation 4 at the moment, well, it's not much other than, just a Kinect, and no one particularly wants or even wanted that anyway, so that was not the selling point anymore. The fact that they were both not backward compatible meant there wasn't much of a differentiator to them much at all. And the only thing that Sony is offering is PlayStation Now, where you can essentially kind of stream your PS3 titles on the PlayStation 4, but that comes at a price, and it seems very hefty price at that. It seems like a rental service, and you're paying a fair bit to play, old games on the PlayStation 4, and people are not necessarily keen on that. So with this new move, having the Xbox 360 backwards compatibility, that now makes the Xbox One attractive again to former Xbox 360 owners who haven't decided to jump, probably because they knew that they were probably going to lose a lot of their past library, but now they have no excuse now, it seems. Well, that depends on how well the Xbox 360 backwards compatibility works on the Xbox One, but yeah, they have less of an excuse now. Which brings me to the other thing with this move. It would seem to me now they can essentially retire the Xbox 360. They were still selling it for a while, even when the Xbox One was released, and they did actually revamp it for a new look to keep it going on. I mean, the thing was released in 2005, and we're in 2015 now, and it's nearing the end of its life cycle. But with this move, they can actually give a fairly smooth transition to the current gen for people who still are holding on to their last gen systems. So that, to me, is honestly the biggest thing that came from this conference, and a pretty damned smart move by Microsoft. We'll have to see how Sony responds in kind. So the other thing that was announced by Microsoft was something that we all knew was coming, because that was kind of not necessarily leaked, but certainly announced a while ago, and that was the Xbox One's new controller, which turns out to be called the Xbox Elite controller. This is a pretty damned interesting controller. It's very much like the standard Xbox One controller. It has pretty much all the functionality of and the buttons and capabilities of that controller. The interesting thing about that one is that it's pretty modular. You can essentially configure it to your liking, as it were. So it actually has interchangeable controls. So if you wanted to, say, change the position of the shoulder buttons to something else that would be a bit more to your liking, you can actually do that. You can change the triggers from where it usually is at the top of the controller to somewhere kind of under the bottom, with these kind of like light triggers that you can kind of literally tap with your finger as well as where you're holding it, rather than having to reach up to the top of it and pull it like a normal trigger. So there's that you can do. You can also change the D-pad. The Elite controller comes with this D-pad, which when I first looked at it, I thought, oh god, they're not doing this again. They're not screwing up for the D-pad, as it were. But this one actually has a kind of very interesting sort of look to it. So rather than it being the usual cross shape as most of these ones are, this one has a faceted concave disc type thing, much like what you usually find on the analog controllers, but it's faceted, so there's kind of like flat parts on it, and you can kind of almost use that as like you would with an analog controller. But you can actually change that to the traditional cross that was on the original Xbox One controller, which I always thought was a vast improvement over the Xbox 360 D-pad, which is just terrible. But yeah, I almost thought that was going to be a step back, and I thought, oh god, we're not doing this again. But the fact that it's interchangeable means we will have to be spared that. And there are quite a few other things that you can do with the controller as well, in terms of using your headsets and sort of linkage and stuff like that. So it's kind of highly customizable, and that looks pretty damned awesome. They did actually already release a dongle you can get to actually use your Xbox One controller with your PC. It does cost a bit, and more damningly, it's only compatible with Windows 10. So if you want to use that, you have to get Windows 10 to use it, which I hate those type of things, in all complete honesty. You know, they did the same thing with Halo 2, which, even though I'm not a big fan of Halo 2, I was a bit knocked off when they decided to make that exclusive to Vista, which was an operating system that I gladly skipped. But Windows 10 does seem to be alright. It's something I'm going to hang back for and to wait and see what happens. But if it turns out alright and is actually hopefully something that I can still use my old programs on, I wouldn't mind jumping to that. I haven't actually really confirmed to see if the new Xbox One controller will actually work with that dongle. I think it should, if it's actually something that's just came out, and you know, it'll be something I'll be certainly keeping an eye on. So another thing that could be considered a first, maybe, I'm not sure, but as we already know, this is something that came out again long before E3 started. Fallout 4, which was something that was heavily rumoured and just really poorly kept secret, that was leak everywhere. The amount of leakage that was coming out pre-E3 was actually Fallout 4. We would do it was never all, and it's actually now. This was also shown in the Microsoft conference, along with an announcement that PC mods, basically mods that you can get for the game that come out on PC, will actually work on your Xbox One too, which is wow. That is something that probably a heck of a lot of people have been clamoring for. Maybe not a heck of a lot of people, but I think it would have been something that would have been desirable for all those console owners who look at the PC Master Race. Personally, I hate that term. For, you know, the people who can actually mod most of their titles on PC and for free, they don't have to pay for it, much to chagrin of Valve, who tried to do something like that, but let's say no more about that. So now at least Xbox One owners can actually share the mods with their PC counterparts, and this is all kind of possible through the power of Windows 10, which is also available on Xbox One. So that's the thing, that's something that's going to be shaking things up a bit, and another differentiator, it seems to me. This still gives credence to a lot of people have been saying that these consoles are becoming more and more like PCs by the day, the only difference being that they're still nowhere near as powerful and they're still nowhere near as open. But this move seems to open it up a little bit more. You know, it's still something that is still very much controlled by the platform holder in terms of the digital storefront and stuff like that. So it's still fairly closed, but this is opening it a little bit more. This is actually kind of cool, and I'm pretty sure I'll be seeing that maybe on future titles. Who knows? I'll have to see how it actually works out. And that's the one thing I sort of wondered of this, you know, what is the certification method of this? Is it literally just going to be, if you can do a PC mod on a PC, you can do it on the Xbox One without any other modifications, without any sort of compatibility testing, you know, QC, stuff like that? Is it just going to be work off the bat, or may the modders have to go through some requirements to be able to get it working on the Xbox One as well? Will there be any kind of specific, unique things that you'd have to use, you know, for Kinect, even though you can use Kinect on Windows as well now anyways? Will there be other kind of criteria that will have to be met through that? And almost immediately when you say, well, if it's Windows 10 compatible, then yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. But then again, there are other things to consider. You know, what about specs? Even though DirectX 12 is obviously a thing, what about things like memory requirements? What about, you know, certain different interfaces that the mods might actually be taking advantage of? will it actually be a thing, or will it be only be certain mods that might not actually be able to work because of certain requirements? Who knows? Who knows what may happen? The fact that at the very least PC mods are actually able to work on the Xbox One, at least with this game and maybe future titles, is a very interesting thing to look out indeed, and another kind of a big thing in that conference. Next up was Microsoft's Indie Games Showcase, which they did show a pretty short sort of fast preview of a lot of the indie games that were coming out on Xbox platform, and there was a couple of really interesting ones in there which they did actually showcase in the show itself. One of them was a new game from Fulbright, who are creators of the fairly controversial Gone Home, which is known to a lot of people as just a walking simulator, but has kind of met tons of praise from one corner and a bit of criticism from another. But they've actually showed off this kind of space exploration, sci-fi type thing, which is in a similar vein to Gone Home, called Tacoma. And that looked kind of interesting. You're essentially roaming in a space station, which seems to be kind of inspired from like the first moon landings and stuff like that. It's all kind of very retro in a sense, but essentially you're on this space station miles away from Earth, and you're going around and uncovering its mysteries. It's all kind of that sort of standard fare, but obviously because now it's in space, there'll be a fair kind of interesting twists and turns in gameplay. So there's that to look forward to. It's also a game which is kind of my personal favourite of the, not to say that entire show, but it's definitely one that I'll hold close into heart, and that's Cuphead, which is a run and gun shooter, but done in very much the very old cartoon style, very old 13s style cartoon. Seems to be inspired by Fleischer and Disney, all those type of old cartoons that were around then. And the reason I like it, not just because it's a run and gun shooter, and I'm kind of a big fan of those type of games, pretty much in the Gunstar Heroes type mold, but it's a very kind of whimsical kind of the slapstick kind of cartoon style, was very reminiscent of stuff like Oswald the Bunny and stuff like that. Although I'm thinking more of the Fleischer ones though, really. And it looks very authentic. I hear a lot of people complain about certain effects that are used in the sort of these modern day graphic APIs, and one I hear a lot of people complain about, or think is actually pretty damn cool, is almost kind of like this gen's lens flare, or this gen's bloom. It's one of those things that if you don't use it right, it kind of ruins the look of the game, what interferes with your gameplay. And that's chromatic aberration, which pretty much kind of adds a sort of a rainbow tint to edges of objects to make them look like they've been shot through an old camera. It's that sort of thing, sort of a cinematic effect that can make a game look very film-like, as it were. I think they've used chromatic aberration in Cuphead to a degree to actually faithfully recreate the old discoloring that you have in these old 30s cartoons, and that, along with the animation, which they seem to have done a great bit of research into to actually get that authentic look, means that the game has this very distinctive style that makes it look like you are actually playing in a real oldie fashioned cartoon. which is pretty cool. You know, it's something that I think that a lot of games want to explore more. I mean, there was South Park: The Stick of Truth, which came out a couple of years ago, I forget. That looks very authentic to the original show that it was based upon. You know, it wasn't 3D graphics with textures stuck on polygons or anything like that. It was actual, you know, proper vector graphics animated in the really rough style of the show itself, and Cuphead seems to bring that in as well. Although I did notice a few things that kind of ruin it a little bit in terms of animation, but overall it does recreate the look very faithfully, and hopefully it'll turn out to be a pretty damn good actual game as well. So I'm looking forward to that. Another game that looks really interesting, another indie title that was showcased, was a game called Beyond Eyes, which was, I suppose you can call it another walking simulator if you want, but this one has a really interesting, I suppose you can call it, gimmick, where essentially the main character cannot necessarily see the whole of the game world, you know, just up to a certain point, which if you were looking at in other kind of situations, you may probably say, oh, the draw distance isn't far enough or anything like that, but this, it's utterly intentional, and you cannot use that accusation at all. It just makes no sense within the context of what's actually trying to be shown. So it seems like it's kind of representing a world of someone who is either nearsighted or have some kind of thing with their vision, and basically the world is essentially painted in front of them as it is revealed, and that kind of leads to some interesting sort of gameplay situations, it would seem. So that looks really, really nice and seems very interesting indeed. So there's that, and the whole slew of other titles were actually shown in that sort of indie games showcase. But what followed that was actually announced, was another service by Microsoft, which brings kind of an early access kind of portal to Xbox Live, and it's called the Game Preview Service, where you can essentially download these games as demos to actually look and evaluate the game and, you know, provide feedback and stuff like that to early releases, you know, alpha, beta and all that kind of stuff on Xbox Live, and that's pretty cool as well. I just hope that it just doesn't get abused in the same way that Steam Early Access does, although I don't know about that. I'm pretty sure there's some kind of a criteria that they'd have to pass first, as in the Xbox Live titles before. Probably needs to be go through some QA and QC and just make sure that everything works. So hopefully it won't be as bad as Steam Early Access is or tends to be. But yeah, that seems quite an interesting thing to see. It's just hope that it kind of actually works out. So another thing that showed up was something that was kind of leaked earlier, but pretty much a rumor, and that is a collection of games from Rareware, or I suppose you can just call it Rare nowadays. We can call it quite a few things actually, but I know this is essentially a compilation called Rare Replay, which is celebrating 30 years of Rare, all the way back from when they weren't called Rare and at one point were called Ultimate Play the Game. Remember those guys from the old Specky years when they released games like Jetpack and Lunar Jetman and Night Lord and Sable Wolf Underworld and stuff like that? Actually, those games will actually turn up in this compilation. This is essentially going to be 30 games dating from way back when it started up until almost present day, or at least very much the kind of the last generation. And these games include the aforementioned titles, the games on the NES, which include RC Pro-Am both 1 and 2. There was actually a sequel, I didn't know that, but there you go, here's a sequel. Snake, Rattle and Roll, I don't know if you remember that. Battletoads is in there, of course, and everyone will be able to experience what a pain that game was. Also Cobra Triangle, which was another kind of really cool but also really difficult game. You also get the original Battletoads game that came out in the arcades, which was actually pretty cool. You get Killer Instinct Gold. I'm not sure if that is actually based on KI2, which I think Killer Instinct Gold is actually based on. It might even be the N64 track one. If that's the case, then about that. But that's in there as well, and quite a few other N64 titles like Blast Corps for the first time in years, Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie, Conker's Bad Fur Day, Jet Force Gemini, Perfect Dark, and then it goes to the Xbox titles and Xbox 360 titles, which includes Grabbed by the Ghoulies, Perfect Dark Zero, and both iterations of Viva Pinata. That's not all of the games that are actually on there, but that's a fair number of them, and for the most part they'll be HD remasters, but I think what they're pretty much aiming to do is make them as authentic as possible. There's even a CRT filter for the Speccy and NES games to try and have that sort of authentic look, which usually never turn out particularly that great anyway, so I don't know if we'll be bothered with that, but it's good that they put that there anyway, and yeah, that's obviously something to look forward to. Although I suppose in one sense you would think, oh well, aren't they doing something? No, had enough of them doing Connect Sports and that. I want to see a new game from them that actually uses the power of the Xbox One. Well, you're getting one, okay? It's called Sea of Thieves, and this is the new IP from Rare, which is essentially a swashbuckling, seafaring, open world pirate type game where you essentially land on islands, explore islands, get buried treasure and even probably buried treasure, and fight natives, and then obviously the best part of it, go on to seafaring battles with other pirate ships and buccaneers and get your enemies to walk the plank and board ships and pillage and stuff like that. They're all absolutely fantastic and all done in their quite sort of distinct Rare style that we all know. And well, I mean, I'm looking at the style of the game, it does kind of remind me very much of the style of Grabbed by the Ghoulies, which was kind of mixed. I mean, I do like Rare games, probably mostly for the playability, the good ones in there anyway, but I always think that their art style and character design is a bit of a mixed bag, and I kind of get that from this game as well, although it is distinct in that sense, and it seems very much recognisable from the stuff that they did back then, and I kind of think that's cool and kind of welcome that back in a sense. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how all this game turns out. I think it's open world game, it kind of pretty much looks it. The trend does seem to be open world games nowadays, and well, it depends on how you feel about that sort of thing. But yeah, like I said, it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. And finally, Gears of War Ultimate Edition. another remaster of a last gen game. Don't we have enough of these already? I'm sorry. I don't want to complain or anything like that, because obviously it's a lot of things that people are actually clamouring for, and they obviously like that sort of thing because they sell. The Last of Us Remastered sold heck of a bit. GTA 5 was given a new lease of life on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One platforms. That was a remastered title, and there are a whole ton of other remastered titles coming as well, and I just think it doesn't really make much sense if it's just for a game from like last generation. If it was an older game, yeah, like Wind Waker HD, that to me makes sense. But if it's just something that just got released, I suppose it's good that you'll be playing on a high res at a much better frame rate. Obviously that's a good thing, but again, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, the Xbox One's got Xbox 360 compatibility, and you got Gears of War. Play that. If you want the more advanced, title, then get the PC version run on the, it's probably don't need a really powerful PC to run that now. On the higher res, that's 60 frames per second, but, well, there it is. If you want it for your Xbox One, Gears of War Ultimate, there it is. Shame there isn't a new Gears of War title coming. Oh wait, yes, there is. So soon after that, one more thing was essentially a gameplay trailer, gameplay in inverted commas, I'll just say that, of the new Gears of War game, which is essentially just now called Gears 4, and this seems to take place in another space and time. They got a couple of new characters they showcased in that game, but of course they're going to be the new horrible monsters that'll be chasing after you in the closed environment there, and you'll be doing the usual sort of third person team co-op shooting and combat and close quarters combat there. So it's going to be not necessarily more the same. They didn't actually show that much details of what's actually going to feature in the game, but we got the trailer, and obviously that has people excited enough, and it was a nice way to round off the conference. So with that over, what do I think of it all? It's alright. I'm not saying it's bad. I mean, the one good thing to come out about it was the announcement of the Xbox 360 backwards compatibility. That was pretty awesome. The Elite controller looks pretty damned cool. Having PC mods on Fallout 4 was a bit of an eye-opener as well. And, those indie games, honestly, I think the indie games were the most interesting thing in the entire show. They looked fabulous, and also the fact that you could actually play them a lot of early access with demos is pretty awesome too. And then you got that Rare Collection, which was something that had been confirmed. Absolutely freaking great. Marvellous. Halo 5 was pretty interesting too. There was also something I didn't really cover, which was an original title by Keiji Inafune of Concept and former Retro devs, actually the actual devs who worked on Metroid Prime for the Nintendo platforms, and it's a new title called Recore, which seems to be a kind of an interesting take on sort of using mechanized beasts to do your bidding. Basically, the trailer was of a young lady in the middle of the desert with a little robot dog type thing, a doggy droid, combating against monsters, and the doggy droid at one point essentially exploded, killed them all, and the orb, that was the only thing that was left. where the woman then picked up and put in a huge gorilla type thing that was just lying there, and essentially it revealed itself to be a game where essentially you can use that orb to fit into other frames that have different abilities. So that looked a pretty interesting game. Very much interesting that it's come from both the minds of both makers of kind of truly influential games over the past few gens before, and they've actually come together and made this original title for the Xbox One. We'll have to see how good that actually turns out to be. There's not that much details on it at the moment, but yeah, it looks kind of interesting. And that's it really. I mean, once again, I am glad, just like last year, I didn't actually post my thoughts last year, but one of my thoughts about the Microsoft conference last year was that thank God they just concentrated on games. I mean, there was this one point where they showcased Forza 5 and it was more of a showcase of this new Ford GT, and everyone was like, okay, Ford GT, great. We're all interested in Forza 5, or Forza 6, I mean. Actually, they were showcasing this new car and a couple of the new features that game had, and yes, it's still running at 1080p 60 frames per second for those who care about that sort of thing, which is obviously a lot of you. Anyways, but yeah, apart from that, I thought it was alright. I wasn't completely blown away by it, but the stuff that they had there that they showed was really interesting and pretty much shows Microsoft's commitment to differentiating the Xbox One platform from the PS4 platform to make it attractive in its own right, because at the moment, other than them still kind of suffering from the backlash they had from the Xbox One reveal that was over 2 years ago, and we still haven't got over it. Still have an uphill battle to climb there, and it's kind of showing the fact that the sales, while actually pretty good, could be better. They're making an effort in trying to make the Xbox One more attractive to a lot of gamers everywhere, and especially those who probably hadn't made up their minds whether they wanted to jump ship from the Xbox 360. Like I said, they have no excuse now. Anyways, so that's my thoughts on the Microsoft conference, and if any of you guys actually have your own thoughts and views on that conference, then please do put that in the comment section below and share it with me through that, or video response or anything like that. And well, thanks for watching, and join me next time. I will be talking about the Sony conference. Till then, thanks for watching, you've been awesome, and keep on playing, folks.